Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over some of the changes in version 3.3 of Gems of War. A full patch notes will be in the description below if you want to read over all of it. I'm only going to be going over most of the more important information. Some of it I will also be excluding as it's a little bit hard to really explain the kind of details related to them, mainly with the two new game modes. Since they aren't currently available right now, there are still some things that we don't really know. But anyways, let's get right into it. As you can see over here, we have a new treasure gnome. It took me around 3 hours to find this guy just for this video. They have drastically reduced its drop rate. It was about 1 in 40 battles earlier. Now it feels like 1 in 500. It takes forever and a half to find one of these guys. Basically, you kill him and you get a little loot bag. And this loot bag can contain things like gems, even diamonds. You could technically farm infinite diamonds off him if you could somehow find him enough. And a bunch of other various resources like keys and a bunch of high-end resources. He also has a chance of dropping a vault key, which unlocks a little boss battle thing that drops even more rewards, and I have yet to get one, but hopefully we will. He does have a new mechanic as well as one other thing that will be added with some of the other game modes that has a chance to flee from battle. Whenever he casts, there's a 30% chance he will flee, so we definitely want to make sure we kill him as immediately as possible, and there we go, he's already dead. That didn't take long. Normally if you're doing this in Explorer, it should be pretty effortless to actually get a kill on him, and as you can see right here, we didn't get the vault key, but we did get, as you can see, 30,000 gold. Not too bad for how long it takes to actually find him. Definitely not that huge of a reward, but he can pop up almost everywhere except for Guild Wars and a few other kind of niche purposes or other areas. But basically within Arena, within Explore, within Challenges, I believe within Quests, within PvP, all those locations can have one of these occur. As you just saw right there, I didn't really mention it because I was talking about the other thing, but replay button. We do have replay button back, so that is definitely a really nice feature now. Let's go throw to Rowan here. Come on, Rowan, go. And down it goes. But there is a replay button now. You don't have to keep going through all those menus. You just simply click this replay button. Probably one of the best features that has actually come into this patch. But in regard to some of the newer stuff, we have all these things over here. If we would stop downloading, let's see, go into here. So, under games, we have the Gnome Vault. This was the thing I was referring to. You get Gnome keys off of a chant from that Gnome that we just saw. There will be a event that will run on some weekends from Friday to Sunday. There's a few different ones that will be coming. One of them is Bounty. It's basically you'll do a bunch of battles, get as high a score you can, and you get a points for that you use in some kind of shop that will give a bunch of rewards. There's going to be a Vault event, and that's the main one related to... Oops, not what I meant to click on. That's going to be the main one related to this Gnome Vault right here. This Gnome Vault can be accessed right now if you happen to randomly get a Gnome key off, or a Vault key off of one of the Gnomes that you randomly find. But it basically just gives you a little battle that has a bunch of gnomes in it that you get for a bunch of rewards, and a little bit more of a boss gnome that will drop an even bigger reward. This boss gnome does have the chance of dropping the new power orbs, which is pretty noteworthy. Speaking about power orbs, there is one new thing added to the Soul Forge. It's the raid boss, or a version of the raid boss, that'll be coming in one of the other modes. He requires 8 of these gigantic power orbs, pretty insane to actually craft, but he is basically like a alternative version of a Great Maul. So if you have Great Maul, basically very similar, though there are some niche purposes where he will be better. But speaking of power orbs, let's go straight into power orbs then. So if we go under the hero collection, we'll be able to see them kind of over here. If we go under our inventory, we can see orbs, all these little orbs here, as well as the key and the orb of power. So what do each of these do? We kind of already went over the key, but let's go over all of these. A smaller green orb will increase a troop's level by 1. First, actually, where do you get these orbs? There's 3 locations. You get them from both the two you get them from both of the 2 new game modes, which is Raids and Invasions, and you also have a chance of getting them from Vault Keys, which you have a chance of getting from the Gnomes. But as far as what these do, is a simple green orb will add 1 level to any troop. A bigger green orb will max level any troop. One of the more useful ones is the blue orb will ascend a troop, meaning you don't need to put any copies to it. It'll just do it to the next rarity. This will be used on things like Legends or Mythics or just really anything that you're trying to get the last Ascension or 2 on. You just use an Orb of Ascension on it, and then you don't need the the actual card numbers to get it up. And then the major Orb of Ascension ends up fully ascending a troop, so if you have a new common that just came out, you only have like 2 copies of it, you want to get it maxed for whatever reason, boom, you use one of those on it, it's maxed. Same thing with Legends, same thing with absolutely anything. You just simply use the orb on it, it's fully maxed. This orb of the brown one ends up doing it for trait. The smaller brown one will do 1 trait, the larger brown one will do all traits. Of course, you would mainly want to use this again on Legends and Mythics, particularly Mythics, as Mythics have the highest trait stone cost, and it doesn't check to see what the cost of the troop is. It would be the same Orb of Wisdom regardless of if you use it on a common to get barely any value, or if you use it on a mythic to get a really, really good value, like on its 2nd or 3rd trait. And the Orb of Clans, this gives 300 seals for the smaller one, and 1,500 seals for the larger one. You do want to make sure you claim the 1,500 seals cap per week. If you use this beforehand, it counts towards your cap, but if you use it after, you still get it, and it adds to the guild cap. So basically, let's say you have 1,300 seals right now, and you go use an Orb of Clans, which gives you 300. You'll get 300 seals, but it'll bring your cap up to the max, meaning there was 200 seals, the seals between 1,300 and 1,500, that basically just went to waste, meaning you essentially just got only 100 seals from this overall, because you took away the 200 that you will no longer be able to get. So if you do use an Orb of Clans, either one of them, make sure you have the 1.5k total before you do, or else you're kind of wasting them. Ideally, you'd want to save these for when your clan, or your guild, I mean, needs to get up to 20,000 or 40,000. If you need to close that gap in any point during your guild to make sure you can go open up your guild chest, that's mainly what you would use those for. And the Orb of Power, as you might be able to tell from all these other ones, is basically just a combination of all of these except the clan ones. It gives you a fully maxed out troop when it's used on something. So it'll fully ascend, fully max level to 20, and fully trait any troop that you use it on. Again, you'd most likely want to use this on Legends and Mythics as you get the best value out of it, though there are some niche situations that you might be able to use on absolutely anything if you happen to get an excess of them. We don't really know how common they are. We know off of the vault keys right now that I don't know if a single person even has any of these now, but the main way you get them is from the 2 new game modes. And speaking of the 2 new game modes, let's go over those really briefly. Not going to mention too much on them, mainly because there isn't really too much information to go on still, but there are raid bosses and invasion. Raid bosses, you're basically going to be running with a partially or fully pure kingdom. So basically what I mean by that is what you have to use within the raid boss battles is based on the kingdom of the event week. So next week, for example, in 3 days and 7 hours, is going to be a Shentang event. So you'll be able to use a bunch of event keys if you don't already have Shentang troops, and then go use a Shentang team against the raid bosses. And then you'll end up getting points both for your guild as well as for yourself. There's going to be individual leaderboards for both the raid bosses and the invasions. Raid bosses are basically just going to be a bunch of individual battles, and with like portals, little minions. It goes from minions to Moloch to minions to Aberrath, and then Zugoff, who is that one mythic guy that we saw earlier, except he's going to have 6 different versions, all various abilities. Going to be really hard to kill, and essentially you have to do as much damage to him as you can. There's also going to be ways to obtain additional battles, so if you did do... each of these have a set amount of battles that you can do, similar to Guild Wars, but unlike Guild Wars, there will be methods that you can actually increase the amount of battles that you can do. And there's going to be leaderboards, so on an individual level, even if your guild happens to not be doing as well, you'll still be able to get additional rewards if you are at least performing well. Do keep in mind, in the case of both raid battles and invasions, it is good to be in a guild that is doing well, though, because you get additional rewards based on your guild's performance. I'm not quite sure what's related to in raid bosses, but I know with invasions, you basically have to kill a bunch of towers, and every single time you do a set amount of towers or anything, you'll basically, all of your guildmates will end up getting a reward. So that's pretty nice in regard to those. They will also have exclusive rewards related to both of them, similar to how Guild Wars has guild troops. Both raid bosses and invasions will have their own troops related to them, as well as the fact that they'll be one of the main ways that you actually obtain those orbs that we were just going over earlier. And I believe that's most of the summary. I'll be going over most of those in much greater detail later, mainly because we haven't actually tried it yet, so all they really have is text-based, and it's a little bit hard to go off of just the text. There's going to be a bounty hunter event similar to the vault I mentioned earlier that has like higher gnomes and higher treasure vault key chance. There's going to be other events where you can basically run from about Friday to Sunday, kind of as like weekend events. They used to have this in the past where they had like multiple EXP weekends or extra gold weekends, but now they're going to be having it with specific ones with like things like Bounty and the Vault and stuff like that. In the case of Bounty, it's just going to be a bunch of battles where you just accumulate a bunch of score, get a bunch of points, and then get a bunch of rewards from doing so. And as I mentioned earlier, the Vault is just the extra stuff for the Gnome, which will be the really good time to try to get a Gnome. At this current moment in time, trying to find that Gnome that we went over earlier takes about like 3 hours. If doing Explore, it takes a ridiculous amount of time. Hopefully under the Gnome event, though, you can find one, hopefully multiple per hour. Orbs, we already went over. Troop upgrading, we've kind of already went over, though there is one thing I should go mention about heroes themselves. There was a nice buff that was done to heroes that is worth mentioning, other than the fact that some people who are higher level may have noticed, is now that your masteries go up to 1,500 now. So as you keep gaining levels, I would go gain a level now, but that might take a little while, even with that little bit of gap. But whenever we get a level now, you will indeed gain a hero mastery now up to level 1,500. It used to be capped at level 1,000. So if we go into our hero menu, you can see now that our masteries are quite a bit higher. And if you already had a higher level, don't worry, they evenly distribute it between all of your skills. That does mean we're slightly less pure purple now, but we're still sticking with pure purple like we always have. As far as with classes, the main change they made with hero classes is you can now use orbs to kind of bypass some of the upgrading, like trying to get the weapons and stuff with them. That pretty much applies to everything, including the hero classes. But the main thing is now we have, I believe it's under here, yes, the perks. You may notice here that the perks that we used to only be able to choose one of, I'm trying to click them right now, it doesn't work. That's because all 3 of these are now active. You now can have both the 2 perks as well as its typing perk active at once. So this is a pretty decent buff to heroes that should make them viable once again. Now that all of them have a pretty substantial buff, most of them are going to be gaining on average 12 to 16 stats approximately. And even if they aren't, they're probably gaining better stats. Like some of them have +4 attack and 2 magic, and while that's only 6 stats total, those are some really good extra stats to have. But some other ones have like HP attack, and there's all different combinations between the hero classes. But this will make them quite a bit more sturdier, since before you had to basically choose, do you want to use the typing or do you want to use the extra stats? But now you get all of them at once, which is pretty nice, and it still counts as the typing for the kingdom, as well as still gets its mastery. So it has all 5 of these active now, instead of only the 3, since you can no longer have any single perk, you have all of them at once. That's a nice little small change to them. Not really that big of a difference, but that little bit of stats will be particularly useful early on in the game, where before you would most likely just use HP or attack. Now you can use both of them at once when using the Warlord class that you get from the Broken Spire. Anyways, a few other changes. We'll be going over some troop changes here. Let me just go through the list. Don't believe there was anything else. Hero upgrading, a few other smaller things like UI changes and stuff like that. Nothing really too huge. A lot of small graphical changes, some bug fixes. They mentioned, oh, we do have new variations of dungeon bosses too, which will be nice. Instead of the same 6 every single week, they have added some new variants, so that's not the exact same thing every single time, so that'll be nice. And now let's get into some troop balancing. Troop balancing can be summarized very, very easily in that basically they have given everything that has mana shield immune to mana drain. So if you look over here, if we go to a troop that has immune to, or just has mana shield, it now has immune to mana drain and mana burn like it used to, mana drain, and mana steal. So this was applied to essentially everything that had mana shield. There were 2 exceptions to this. Lady Arnerial, or actually 3. Lady Arnerial now has a 1 higher mana cost and does not have, I mean, it does have the immunity drain, but it got the 1 higher mana cost to balance out the fact that it has this new immunity drain. Every single elf got this new trait. There's 4 different forms of it. It's basically immune to mana drain, immune to silence, immune to fairy fire, and immune to 1 other thing, depending on what kind of elf they are. And every elf ended up getting this, so they did rebalance a couple of them accordingly. Some other pretty noteworthy things is Valkyrie got it removed. Valkyrie no longer has it, so she is quite a bit weaker, to the point that she might not be used as much anymore, to be honest. Still just as powerful as she was the previous patch, but definitely would have been nice if she still had that mana shield. It's like the 3rd time she's getting nerfed. First it was getting rid of her necromancy, now it's that. And yeah, she's starting to head down there to not be as useful. Always been pretty good though due to the soul gains, but do keep that in mind. Some other noteworthy things are Diviner has it, of course, now. every single thing, or pretty much every single thing from that new kingdom ended up getting the Sky Ancestry, which is immune to Mana Drain, Silence, Fairy Fire, and Mana Burn. And as I mentioned, there's a bunch of different 4th ones. Tyree ended up getting it, which she didn't even have it before. Her useless Arcane got replaced, so that's pretty nice that she now has that immune to Mana Drain. I used to say Tyree's not really that good, particularly for late game, but she's actually pretty viable now. Now that she has that Mana Drain immunity plus some pretty good board control for a very cheap mana cost, not too bad at all. There was one other one that got slightly nerfed. Oh yes, both the Florian and Nyx both got nerfed. Nyx got, both of them got moved to 14 mana cost, but in the case of the Nyx, it lost its immune to Mana Drain, or what would have been immune to Mana Drain. It had Mana Shield and of course lost it, and now has Fireproof instead. One other pretty noteworthy one is they made a fun change to Dragon Soul. Which one's the Dragon Soul? Let's see. There it is. So many various things. But Dragon Soul, you can see here, it's got rid of its Mana Shield, it's now just a Dragon Bond, and it has Rebirth, which is a really cool ability, though probably even more annoying than what it was before. It now has a 50% chance to become a baby dragon with full mana on death. And now this baby dragon will then transform into another random dragon. At this current moment in time, with how many dragons there are in a game, there is a 1 in 32 chance that that baby dragon will then become another Dragon Soul, which would be really funny if it does, though it'll just transform into most likely some other dragon that will just sit there instead. But yeah, that's a lot of durability. Not only do you have the initial Dragon Soul with pretty good durability, it then transforms into a baby dragon that will survive for a little while, and if it doesn't get drained, it will then tank a few hits, then transform into another dragon that, yeah, it just completes a really huge cycle. This was surprisingly a buff to Dragon Soul, not really a nerf. Unfortunately, that he didn't really get immune to Mana Drain, but still, he's stronger than he was the previous patch. So, still really viable to go use yourself a Dragon Soul. One thing to note is a lot of things are available for refunds due to their changes. Some of them that don't really make too much sense, but yes, all these are currently available. All 8 of these are currently available for refunds. The only ones I would really bother going for a refund would most likely be Florian, Nyx, probably Prince of Thoris if you happen to have put anything into him, and that's about it. Dark Maiden, Lady Ornerial, Valkyrie, and Tyree, and Dragon Soul. All 5 of those are still very, very viable. It's just basically every single one of these that are epic. Well, actually, never mind, that's not true. Well, these 3 epics are the ones that you would not really need. Epics tend to have pretty overly expensive traits, and given that these have gotten nerfed, they're not really that worth going for. Actually, Prince of Thoris didn't actually get nerfed, but still, he wasn't really viable to begin with, so if you did put anything into him and you don't need him traded, definitely untrade him, because you'll get those 100% of your resources back for doing so. There were a few other smaller changes too, like Xenos finally got buffed, if I can remember how on earth to spell his name. There he is. Not really to the point where he's viable, but at least now he's not completely horrible. Yeah, he's still horrible. I would not bother using him ever. Don't even bother crafting him unless you're doing it for the achievement or for completionist purposes. But under any other small changes, War got a small attack buff, Summoner got a nice rebalance that made it pretty viable with a HP buff to its thing. Actually, that's probably worth showing. This is a pretty good early game troop now. Well, it kind of already was, but now it scales. As you can see, it now gives all allies 16 life. It used to be only 5, and then summons a Bone Dam. And he's been reworked a couple times. At his current state, he's not that bad. Definitely a really good early game summoner when you don't have better options yet. So definitely something to consider. After his buff, Orc Veteran and got Ice Witch, and Ice Witch just got basically slightly more damage, just so they're not as horrible. Same as Claw Dancer, all pretty irrelevant. And it's pretty much all of them that I can see. Of course, all the elves got, all the elves got buffed, like we already showed. All of them ended up getting their immune to Mana Drain traits. I don't believe there was any other in there, and nope, that's pretty much everything with the new patch. So, yeah, as far as this quick summary of this patch, you can basically just say they added a few new game modes and this little gnome that is extremely elusive and never wants to come up in battle. For the most part, I do enjoy the changes that they made to this patch. I'm really looking forward to see what they are doing with raid bosses and invasions. Gonna feel a little bit weird not having Guild Wars anymore. Didn't really state that, but as you can kind of tell by the way that this is, Guild Wars is now only once every 3 weeks. So now we'll have Guild Wars, then raid bosses, then invasions, and we'll keep cycling through that over and over again. So that basically means only like once a month we really get, maybe twice a month, we'll end up getting a Guild Wars. And that also applies to these. But still, it'll be cool. Each of them supply their own challenge. With Guild Wars, you need to use pure color. With raid bosses, you need to use whatever the specific kingdom is. And with invasions, you need to use whatever specific troop typing is. So if they say dragon, you gotta run dragons and stuff like that. The only slight issue with the raid boss and invasions, though, might be trying to get the troop type itself. For raid bosses, it might be a little bit easier because since it's related to the event, you could just throw some event keys at it and boom, you just got yourself a team. But with invasions, it might be a little bit harder because whatever the event week is, it might not be as easy to get the troop typing. Like, let's say it says wild folk there. Even if it's a wild folk kingdom, wild folk are so weak that it wouldn't really work out. They would have to do really strong classifications for this to really make it kind of work, like dragons, divines, daemons, stuff like that. If they start doing some of the really weaker niche ones, like let's say they say a merfolk for one of these days, that would be ridiculously hard with what currently exists to actually run invasions with it. But we'll see exactly how it turns out. Anyways, guys, if you still have any other questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. I know it was a little bit all over the place with this, but I was mainly just trying to get a quicker summary because they have a lot of data just all it's going down on the changelog there. But if you want to read through it for yourself, of course, it will be in the description below, the full entirety of it. So there were several details I didn't really mention, most of which are pretty relevant for the most part. If I missed anything, definitely feel free to leave it in the comment section below. We will, of course, be summarizing quite a bit more of these into the future. A little bit hard to really go over these in too much detail, simply because there's a lot of details we don't know about it, and I don't want to say anything accidentally right now that is incorrect to how they actually perform. So for now, we're just going to leave it at this. Anyways, guys, if you have any other questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.